Hi everyone, welcome to the second topic of the Political Education Project's 10-week course on COVID, climate and capitalist crises. I'm Joe Guinan with the Democracy Collaborative.
I'm Seán Byers from Trademark Belfast. We're sharing this short video to help you prepare for our second online Sunday School, which takes place on the 28th of February at 3 o'clock GMT. During the Sunday School, we'll try to reach a critical understanding of what's going on in our world today, with what seems to be a pile-up of multiple overlapping crises that are making life ever harder for more and more people here in Ireland, Britain, and across the world. What we're doing here is sharing some thoughts and questions to help you prepare and think about the discussion ahead. As socialists, we know that we need to understand the world in order to change it. That's the essence of what we're trying to do with the Political Education Project. And in the face of increasingly dangerous and unstable world, it's more important than ever that we understand the capitalist system, its inbuilt contradictions and crisis tendencies.
Our topic for this session is really the current crisis that's unfolding all around us and that we're all experiencing in a deep and personal way. It's clearly a moment of deep crisis in the world economy, a complicated and overlapping crisis that has many interlocking dimensions. And it can be really difficult to keep track of and comprehend them all, let alone think about how we might intervene to better respond. As Lenin was reputed to have said, there are decades in which nothing happens and months in which decades happen. That's what it feels like at the moment, that decades worth of change is occurring all at once and in a very rapid and unsettling way.
And in the absence of real explanations for these multiple crises, there's a danger that people reach for other explanations, for the conspiracy theories and racist reactionary explanations of the far right. These have taken hold under Trump in large parts of America, but we know that Ireland and Britain are not immune to them. Whether it's the anti-maskers or anti-vaxxers, or the COVID deniers, or the 5Gers, and the QAnon types, there's a growing risk of conspiratorial narratives taking hold. And all the while the crisis rages and deepens, it's a dangerous loop. But in fact, the answers to why we're facing a world in crisis are far simpler, scarier, and more challenging. What we're going to explore with you is the idea that the crisis we're facing is not external to the system, capitalism, but intrinsic to it. That in short, capitalism is crisis. And we'll look at three aspects of this: climate change, the long structural economic crisis and inequality, and COVID. These are distinct but interwoven aspects of a capitalist system that also feeds on racial injustice, imperialism, and unending war.
Even before COVID, which we'll come to in a minute, we were facing a steadily building crisis of both the economy and of our climate. Capitalism, you see, is an economic system that's based upon extraction. The extraction of profits, of returns to capital extracted from labor, and also extraction from the natural world. As such, it is a regime of crisis, one that generates economically and ecologically unsustainable outcomes. Herbert Stein, who was on US President Richard Nixon's Council of Economic Advisors back in the 1970s, once quipped, "If something cannot go on forever, it will stop." As a regime of endless capital accumulation in a world of finite limits, capitalism cannot go on forever. It will crash up against limits, ecological limits, social limits. That's the source of deep crisis in our system. So what does that look like in practical terms? On economic inequality and the economic structural crisis, let's look at just two figures. In the United States today, just a couple of hundred people own as much wealth as the bottom 200 million Americans put together. Looked at globally, just a handful of billionaires own as much wealth as half of the entire population of our planet. And this negative trend, which represents a medieval concentration of wealth and power, is deeply problematic for democratic culture, and it's escalating. On the environment, we're also clearly fulfilling the warnings of the landmark 1972 study, The Limits to Growth. The Limits to Growth study showed us that if we continued along the same path we were on over 4 decades ago, we would eventually reach a breaking point, what the authors called environmental overshoot. Knowing what we knew back then, and despite important environmental victories we've won over the years, it's astonishing to see that we're very much still on the same path projected in that study, despite all efforts to get us to move in a different direction. Just by way of example, today, soil depletion has destroyed 1/3 of all arable land in the world, which means we only have around 60 harvests left. Meanwhile, natural resources are being consumed at a rate around 1.5 times the Earth's ability to regenerate them. We've also lost nearly 2/3 of all vertebrates since the 1970s. We're in an era of the 6th mass extinction. Even the most progressive and far-reaching climate agreement, the Paris Agreement, in the unlikely event that we were to adhere to it, would put us on a course of 3 or 4 degree increases in temperature, instead of limiting that increase to below 2 degrees, the clear and agreed upon threshold to keep us within a climate safety zone. These are very large order negative trends that are escalating. The inconvenient truth that we face is that it's a problem beyond politics and reform, beyond good projects and initiatives and campaigns. This is a systemic crisis at the very heart of our capitalist political economy.
When these long trends get steadily worse year in, year out, it's clear that something more profound, something systemic is at play. As the ecological rift widens, we must recognise that the core features of the current system, unrestrained growth, a fixation on GDP, ever greater concentrations of wealth and power, a commitment to short-term results to maximise profits, and the dispensability of human life are simply incompatible with a sustainable, just and equitable future. We will never be able to go far enough or fast enough without addressing the defining inbuilt features of our political economic system, which constantly work against equitable, sustainable solutions. We must address the nature, design, and implications of the system, by which we mean capitalism. This was the conclusion reached by socialist thinkers of the 19th and early 20th centuries, and by leading environmental thinkers and activists in the 1960s and 70s. They saw that saving the planet and humanity would require us to seek a fundamental transformation of our prevailing system of political economy. In other words, they believed that the problem was the system itself. These two major systemic problems, economic and environmental, are two sides of the same coin. To solve one, we must solve the other. And the challenge for us as socialists is to find ways that hold promise for solving both of them at the same time.
That brings us to the latest aspect of the crisis, the COVID pandemic, and the accompanying economic crisis that has been deepened and exacerbated by it. COVID-19 poses a double challenge. Beyond the terrifying public health emergency, the necessary response has been repeated economic shutdowns of unprecedented proportions. But that's only the beginning of our difficulties. Once the medical emergency passes, we're going to emerge into a shattered economic landscape. The challenge of restarting, in some sectors even rebuilding, a severely stressed economy will remain. And the inequalities of wealth, power, and control we faced beforehand will have been amplified many times over. We've prepared a short essay for you on the multifaceted dimensions of the current crisis, of climate, of COVID, of economic insecurity. And you can find that essay on the links below.
We recommend that people read the essay in advance of the next Socialist Sunday School, which takes place on the 20th of February at 3 o'clock GMT. The essay will give you some material to dig into around the themes we'll be discussing on the day, and we hope you'll be able to bring your thoughts, your questions, your knowledge, your perspectives to bear on the discussion after reading the essay. Obviously, we'd love everyone to be able to do the reading and bring their ideas to the discussion, but we know that life's not that straightforward and not everyone will be able to. That's fine too. The most important thing is that people attend the Sunday School. Links to the session will be sent out by email soon.
So here are some questions for you to think about as you do the reading or as you prepare to join us for the Socialist Sunday School. What is it about capitalism that naturally tends towards crisis? What are the real ecological and social limits to growth? How has COVID landed with you? What's been your experience? And how do these concepts help you make sense of what's going on all around us? Lastly, whose interests have really been served by the government response to COVID? And what might we as socialists do differently? Really looking forward to joining you to discuss these and other issues at the Socialist Sunday School. Thank you.